If you've been a game developer for a while, then you probably have a junkyard of unfinished projects on your hard drive. I do too. There is no shame in that. This video is not me going, you should feel ashamed about not finishing projects because look at me, I have all of these finished projects. No, it's not like that at all. I also suffer from this and a lot of people suffer from this. And my aim in this video is not really to give you a solution, but to give you the landscape of what's happening, because often when you understand what's actually going on inside of your brain, then you can take measures to fix it. And usually the solution is very personal. It depends on your circumstances. So you have a lot of unfinished projects, and this could be positive. Perhaps you like to prototype a lot of ideas. So you create a lot of projects, you test something, and then you scrape it, which is very positive. This is how game development is supposed to happen. But if you never finish projects, this could be a sign that you have poor finishing skills. I don't really know how to call it. Maybe it's a skill, maybe it's an art of finishing, or maybe it's a mix of both. But finishing projects and actually releasing them to the world is what builds your pedigree as a game developer. And I noticed this in myself when I started publishing games online to itch.io, to Google Play, to Newgrounds. There were these 2D games that had like one mechanic and were usually poorly executed, as your first games should be. And the responses I got were mixed. Some were positive, some were negative. And that's what I'm talking about. And this is important. The fact that you create a game and have it played by at least one person online, a complete stranger, that's a big achievement. Because of course, if you talk to family members or friends, they may play it out of pity and because they know you, but to get a complete stranger to try your game and some of them will like it, that's pretty big. I can't really describe how it feels. You have to feel it. And those moments could be turning points in your game dev journey or career if you want to turn this into a career. Okay, let's explore some critical concepts and laws that make it hard to be a finisher. And I'm talking about laws of the universe or laws of psychology, whatever you want to call them. Being aware of these laws can transform your game dev journey. The first law that we're going to talk about is the law of diminishing returns. In game development, this means that for every hour that you put into your game, the impact of that hour on the overall quality or player experience eventually starts to decrease. And you notice this especially at the beginning of projects, where each asset you add, each script, each sprite, each model has a huge impact on the project, because the project was empty. Now all of a sudden you have a character that can move, you have your first enemy, you have your first environment, you have your first UI, and all of these things start falling into place. But a few months down the line, the same efforts that you did at the beginning will only make minimal changes that you barely notice sometimes. So you hit a point where you spend a lot of hours tweaking perhaps a single animation, adding one more particle effect, optimizing a minor piece of code that only has a minimal impact on performance. This is a normal evolution of every project. Now, the problem is if you focus on these changes and you have the same expectations as you had in the beginning of the project, this is where you're going to have motivation problems. You're going to say to yourself, I made all of this progress, yet nothing has changed from last week's version or from last month's version. And I noticed this a lot on YouTube, game devs who post devlogs, and the more progress they make, the longer the devlogs take, or they simply burn out because they put a lot of pressure on themselves to have visible results. And people who watch these devlogs on YouTube are not game developers. They're not aware that to get a visual change, something that would take you a couple of days at the beginning of the project, now it's probably going to take you 6 months. So it's a tricky law, this law of diminishing returns. And also you have the danger of perfectionism. I suffer from this a lot. I'm a perfectionist. I need things to be perfect in order to publish them. But often you will notice that this perfectionism is an illusion. You can never attain 100% 90% perfection. And this ideal that you have will change a lot the more you gain experience. For example, 5 years ago, the things that I considered as perfect in my work, now I would consider that as way below average. So you can't really attain this notion of perfection. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you'll be satisfied even with 70% or 80% of what you expected. And now you just have to do it and release that game and move on to something else. So really it's about recognizing when something is good enough and stop pouring resources on it and just publish it somewhere and move on. The second rule is the 90-90 rule. What this rule states is the first 90% of everything you do in your project accounts for 90% of development time, and the remaining 10% account for the other 90% of development time. This rule comes from software engineering and it applies perfectly to game development. So you build your levels, you implement your systems, and for a while everything feels like it's progressing rapidly. You see that progress bar hit 90% and you think, well, we're almost there. But then reality hits and the remaining 10% is where the real grind begins. So you have things such as extensive testing, finding and fixing obscure bugs, balancing gameplay, integrating all your systems seamlessly, optimizing performance across different hardware, localization. Like if you go for consoles, you have platform certifications, then you have to prepare marketing assets and also prepare for the launch of your game. So you have a lot of these details and they're not exactly hard to do by themselves, but the sheer amount of the small things that you have to take care of makes the last 10% of your project feel as long as the first 90%. A game project is something complex. What this means is that you cannot foresee all the complexities ahead of you. There are some bugs that will only appear when all of your systems are in place, or perhaps on specific hardware configurations. Perhaps there are balancing issues that will only appear when all your gameplay elements are in place. So this final stretch can be often longer, more frustrating, and more unpredictable than the initial development phase. And many developers get stuck there. Many burn out and many give up because that 10% seems endless. But understanding this rule is not about being pessimistic. It's about being realistic. You have to budget your time and energy and pace yourself because this crucial, often underestimated final phase is going to require a lot of emotional effort. Now let's talk about the third element of our subject today, which is the shiny object syndrome. I see it as a consequence of the first two rules. Okay, so you have these diminishing returns, and then you have that 10% of the project that takes as long as the first 90%. Now you may feel cornered. So your reaction is to see new projects as an escape from your current project, not knowing that if you do that, if you jump to another project, you will face the same issues. Perhaps not at first, but you will. So let's talk about this concept of the shiny object syndrome. So this is the irresistible urge to abandon your project for a new, more exciting idea that just popped in your head. So this new project feels fresh, exciting, and easier than the problems you're currently facing. So you put your current project on hold, like just for a little while. That's what you tell yourself to quote unquote prototype this new idea. Now the problem is that little while often turns into weeks, months, or even permanently abandoning the first project. You get a taste of excitement of starting something new without having to face the hard work of finishing, because finishing is indeed hard work. And if you've worked on a few projects, you will notice that starting is a lot easier than finishing, or at least that's your impression. So this syndrome is a creativity trap. While new ideas are vital, constantly chasing them without seeing a project through means you never build the muscle of completion, because there is valuable feedback in finishing a game and releasing it somewhere and seeing people play it. You never learn the lessons of a full development cycle. Ultimately, you never experience the immense satisfaction of shipping something. Now you have to be nuanced here. I'm not talking about biting more than you can chew, working on a project that far exceeds your skills and forcing yourself to work on it and try to finish it. In that case, the best course of action is to actually put it on hold, then scale down, not change the type of the project, but actually take your game mechanics and perhaps work on a subset of those mechanics, or even a simpler version of those, then create a small game that you you can release within a reasonable time frame. And then one day you come back to the project that you put on hold. And that is very different from completely abandoning a project for a new one. So you have to be ruthless with scope. You have to be aware that your ideas are worthless if you can't implement them, and try to always focus on the core experience without adding any fluff or any extra features. And you have to plan for the final 10%. Be aware of it. Be aware of the 90-90 rule, because you will experience it. It's real. And then resist the shiny object syndrome. If you're working on a project and you don't have any skill issue, any resource issue, then continue to work on it, even if it gets boring at some point. Find a way to release it somewhere, and only when you do that can you move on to your next project. So finishing is not really about releasing a game. It's about growing as a game developer. It's about turning your dreams into reality. And once you become a finisher, you'll basically become unstoppable as a game developer. Perhaps you will not make a hit game right now, but being a finisher puts you in the best possible position to one day release something really good. So good luck. I am in the same boat. I also try to remind myself that finishing is often hard, but it's the right thing to do. It's how we grow as game developers. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye bye.